Hey travelers, I'm super excited because on the next few episodes of Travel Rebooted, we're visiting one of my all-time favorite places, the beautiful country of Ferelden in the land of Thedas. You might have heard about it in a series of documentaries about some major events of the Dragon Age. But even if not, you're in for a treat. So without further ado, let's go! My first trip to Ferelden was about 10 years ago, and even though it was in rough shape at the time, I fell in love. The scenery is beautiful, the history is fascinating, but nothing compares to the unbreakable Ferelden spirit. Despite everything the world throws at it, somehow Ferelden endures, and no place embodies that stubborn perseverance better than Redcliffe. If you travel to Ferelden by land, chances are good you'll wind up in Redcliffe. It sits near a major pass through the Frostback Mountains. Legend says Redcliffe Castle has only fallen to an invading force 3 times in history. The first time was over 4 centuries ago to Calenhad the Great, the first real king of Ferelden. I should mention, those other 2 defeats, both related to a brutal occupation by the neighboring land of Orlais. First when they invaded, and then when they were finally kicked out 80 years later. That war only ended about 40 years ago, so visitors should keep in mind that attitudes toward Orlais can range from hesitant to openly hostile. To avoid problems, Orlesian travelers can try saying they're from Navarra instead. The first time I went to Redcliffe, it was right as the Fifth Blight started. For those new to Thedas, a blight is when a species of semi-intelligent monsters called Darkspawn swarm up from deep underground and attack every living thing. It was not, in other words, a great time to be a tourist. But when you already have reservations, you find a way to make do. Unfortunately, the blight meant people weren't really into discussing local history and nice picnic spots, and wilderness tours weren't an option. I took a few photos around town, but after a tour of Redcliffe Castle, I moved on to other stops on my itinerary. On my last trip, though, folks had a lot more time to chat, and I had a better camera. One lady I met wanted nothing more than to talk about Redcliffe's history, so we chatted about everything that had happened since my first visit. I learned the town had been in pretty rough shape by the end of the Blight, so they had to do a lot of rebuilding. Most of the new construction was a little to the east of the original site, so it was almost like visiting a whole new city. On my first trip, I toured a rustic windmill high on one of the red cliffs that give the village its name. Its simple exterior hid an awesome secret, a hidden passage beneath the shallow edge of Lake Calenhad, all the way into the castle's creepy old cobweb dungeon. When I returned, I was sad to find the windmill in ruins, its tall white sails lying on the ground. I couldn't tell if the secret tunnel was still intact, but I have a hunch at least a few people are still keeping tabs on such a useful resource. A central feature of most Ferelden towns is the Chantry, the dominant religious organization in Thedas, as well as the church-like building that houses it. I saw a lot of Redcliffe's original Chantry on my first trip. The city officials had declared a state of emergency and called up the militia to handle an attack on the town, and everyone else was herded into the Chantry for safety. It was hard to really appreciate the decor with cots everywhere and the furniture piled against the walls, but it was definitely a memorable experience. The city grew in the rebuilding efforts after the Blight, and the Chantry decided to construct a second house of worship in the newer part of Redcliffe. They clearly spared no expense, and the building was lovely, even though it had suffered a little damage in the ongoing war between the mages and the Templars. Oh, that reminds me. Magic is a thing in Thedas. That sounds cool, and it is, but it also kind of freaks out the average Joe, and it's been at the heart of centuries of political and religious conflict. Historically, the Chantry required mages to train and live permanently in buildings called circle towers. From childhood onward, mages were guarded, some would say oppressed, by the highly trained knights of the Templar Order. In the last few years, that whole situation blew up. Pretty much literally. Opinions on the subject can get heated, so It's probably not something to bring up in casual conversation. Anyway, my experience in the new chantry was a lot more pleasant. And not only because the sounds from outside were people chatting and birds singing, instead of monsters growling and swords clashing. The stained glass windows in the other chantry were pretty, but the ones here were stunning, depicting scenes from the story of the prophet Andraste. The art and sculptures infused the whole building with a sense of peace, and it was nice to catch my breath before heading out to sample the local shopping and nightlife. Redcliffe's harbor had been all but deserted on my first visit. This time, it was packed, with fishing boats and cargo ships vying for space. The busy port is the largest one on Ferelden's giant Lake Calenhad, so it attracts merchants of all kinds. I was thrilled to find a dwarven bookseller near the docks, providing a nice counterpoint to the permanent shops up the hill. For such a small shop, the selection was great. I was super geeked that he even had a copy of Hard in Hightown by one of Thetis's most famous authors, Varric Tethris. For a closer look at this great book and its fascinating author, check out our side trip. Links in the description. Oh, right. In addition to humans, Thetis is also home to 3 other races: dwarves, elves, and Kosith, usually called Kunari, though technically that's their religion. Most Kunari live far to the north, so it's unusual to see them in Ferelden, but seeing dwarves, and especially elves, is pretty common. The same rules apply as with any other person. Be kind, be respectful, and don't touch without permission. Seriously, the kind of person that would just walk up and grab an elf's pointed ear or a Kunari's horn should do Ferelden and their fellow travelers a favor and stay home. Don't be that guy. Nobody likes that guy. After I finished shopping, it was time to find my hotel, and I was glad to see the lodgings had also improved over the years. The small tavern in Old Redcliffe where I stayed on my first trip was no longer an option. One of the locals told me the owner of the place had moved away to open a brewery. But the large and comfortable Gull and Lantern Inn in the heart of New Redcliffe was a more than adequate substitute. The rooms were clean and reasonably priced, with a writing desk for business travelers and free room service included. My only complaint was that bathing and toilet facilities were, housed separately. But unfortunately, with rustic destinations like Ferelden, that's kind of inevitable. The tavern downstairs was packed, which I took as a testament to the quality of the service and the cuisine. One corner nook held a board for a Theodosian version of chess, while a larger area featured live music. I sneaked a peek into the cozy kitchen, but really the menu was a given. In places like this near the waterfront, dinner is almost always the catch of the day. I'll admit, I'm not big on mystery seafood, but with enough of the right beverage, it wasn't so bad. And if there was one thing the Gull and Lantern had plenty of, it was beverages. The rest of the evening got a little fuzzy after that, though I'm told the minstrel found my impromptu harmonies hilarious. Hint. Someone may suggest the Dwarven Ale, or ask if you'd like to try a drink called Marist Lock. If you like keeping your insides on the insides, say no. The next morning, after hitting up the local healer for my pounding headache, I made a stop at the last major addition to the city since my first visit, a large monument honoring the hero of Ferelden, the Grey Warden who saved Redcliffe. Grey Wardens are a group of elite fighters from all walks of life who protect the world from Darkspawn and the Blight. The griffin is their traditional symbol. I noticed the torches surrounding the statue stayed lit around the clock, and it made me think of the chantry's eternal flame of Andraste, only allowed to go out once a year. I wondered if the griffin's torches were kept burning like that, relit on the anniversary of the Blight's final battle, to mourn those who fell and celebrate those who survived. The monument was so powerful, I had to pick up the souvenir t-shirt. I planned to spend the rest of that day touring Redcliffe Castle. The first time I visited, I got to see nearly the whole building, right down to the spooky dungeons with their decorative fake skeletons. At least, I'm pretty sure they were fake. Right? Anyway, on this trip I happened to arrive during a visit from Ferelden's monarch, which would have been cool, except I didn't get to actually see any royalty, and the only area open to the tour was the throne room. To be fair, the throne room was really nice. It was clear they'd made some major upgrades, probably during all the other construction in Redcliffe, and the changes really gave the room a sense of solemn grandeur. But you can only take so many photos of the same 3 statues, and it wasn't long before I was ready to move on. I'd originally planned to spend another night in town, but since it was still early, I decided it was time to head out beyond the gates of Redcliffe, into the wild and beautiful hinterlands of Ferelden. Thanks for watching! To see more travel highlights of virtual destinations, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if there's a game location you'd like me to visit, tell me in the comments below. If you enjoy what I do, feel free to support me on Ko-fi.com or check out my travel stickers, postcards, and other designs on Redbubble. Links are in the description. Safe journeys, and see you next time on Travel Rebooted.